Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH FM, New Haven's home for community radio. This is Paul Bass inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Today we have a man who's been making New Haven tick a long time, since before this station was founded, State Representative Roland Lemar. He's running for his seventh two-year term, representing the 96th district.
That's right.
With east side of town. And he's on the air today to show us why he's running for re-election, how his last term went, co-chairing the Transportation Committee, what he's looking forward to in the term ahead if he wins again. Thanks for coming on, Roland.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Before we get to that, I got to ask you what people are really thinking about the most, which is the politically, the debate coming up next Tuesday with, wait, the 10th is a Wednesday?
I think it's...
No, it's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, yeah.
Between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. If you were the advisor in the room, because you've been an advisor in the room for debates, what would you tell Kamala Harris to do in this debate?
I mean, I think what she has done over the last few weeks in response to Trump's attempts to rile this up, to drag it down into the gutters the way he's done in campaigns past, has been perfect. And I continue to have her stay the course right now, which is smile, casually brush it aside, and move on to being smart on policy, good at like hitting to her key talking points, making sure she's very policy focused, because the act of Trump, people are familiar with it, they're tired of it, and they're mostly just waiting to see if you take the bait. So if she can avoid taking the bait, laugh it all off, let him say whatever he's going to say, and be the grown-up in the room, I think that's what people are excited to see. It's what Biden did well.
She didn't have a good history of that, of like doing well, and she's challenged even by friendly reporters. She's done well the last few weeks.
That's right.
Trump has a hard time staying on message, like in all his debates or speeches after 15 minutes. It's just the show. And, True Social's down 70%. They're claiming that the right-wing websites have their readership down. People a little tired of the act. But it's a tie race right now.
It's going to stay a tie race. Let's not lose sight of this. There's a lot of excitement on the Democratic Party side right now. People are feeling better than they were feeling a few months ago.
Because it was completely lost.
It was lost.
Not just presidency, but both houses of Congress.
But this is going to stay a tie race until the end. There is going to be no October surprise that swings this election one way or the other. This is going to stay a tie race until the end. And if you watch Trump and the experience of him in debates, really just standing up and talking, is if he doesn't think he has the crowd, he reaches for it. And if he doesn't get the response out of you that he thinks he's going to get, he'll push further and harder. And he starts to lose all sense of reality and just grabs whatever he can to try to feel like he's got the room again. So if you can just stay calm, let him pull off his antics, don't take the bait, he reaches more and he just ends up looking.
What would you tell her about when a person running for president retweets that you're a hoe? How does one respond to that? Just the same? Laugh it off?
Well, I mean, partly in this scenario, this is something that female candidates have had to deal with really for the last 30, 40 years of a growing number of female candidates running for office. It has been a pretty common approach for male candidates to either diminish them by thinking, well, she's too pretty to be in office, or, well, I don't know what she was doing in college. I know what I was
well, he's also retweeting about the blowjobs and things like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've all seen that, and I think most people who are actually paying attention to this election have dismissed that as just Trumpism. But we also know that that's something that female candidates have had to deal with in a way that
So then, how do you your adjustment to stay above?
That.
So, is there? It would feel sometimes a response is what makes you feel good, and people already agree with you feel good because you're telling off the other person, but doesn't necessarily sway the person needs to be swayed. So if you're trying to appeal to that independent voter, especially a woman who's also been called a hoe or things like that, when people don't take you seriously by someone who has been found liable for sexual misconduct and, porn stars, sex and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you kind of tell them off, or do you stay restrained and just still stay above it because you know that people don't like it?
Personally, I think she's got to stay above it, because the moment this conversation puts these two people on an equal footing with that regard, we lose the upper hand. It can't be a conversation about
That's what's surprising about Biden in his debate. He got so low with Trump.
Yeah.
And he argued about who was better at golf.
Yeah. No, and that was silly.
What was happening? By that time, it was so over in that debate, but I couldn't believe that was happening.
Yeah. And this is why it's so important. And this is an experience and a level of expertise and advice that I'm not equipped to give, or this is why it's so important for female candidates specifically to talk to a number of female candidates who've gone
Have you
through
ever
this
had
in
a
the
debate
past.
for one of your races?
Yeah, no, I've debated. My first, during the primary against Deborah Hauser and against John Morrison during those first few campaigns. I had debates against the ward co-chair I ran against when I first ran for the Board of Alders.
So what do you remember from debates? What's important?
Being honest, telling people the truth no matter what, and being like sort of relaxed about it. It's like it's getting off the talking points as much as you possibly can, but like making sure you're true to yourself and you're on message about what you believe.
That is counter what I think the advice usually is. The advice usually is have your talking points. That if your 2 points are going to be taxes, immigration, my opponent's a phony. No matter what you're asked, what you have for breakfast this morning, what should we do about the nuclear codes? By the end of the response, you're supposed to get back that talking point. So you don't agree with that.
I mean, you can do that 2 times, you can do that 3 times, and then people start tuning you out, and people get a little annoyed with you. Like, you want the top line message to be your, like, what you've determined are the core issues that people care about, but you've got to hit them. But like, if you're not adaptable, and if it looks like you're just canning your responses, like, people lose tired of you. They think of you any other politician. You lose like natural momentum that you might gain from thinking, this is a candidate who really cares about people, and it's like, I could hang out with that person.
And politicians like you and jurists like me have always loved debates. We think they're really important, put a lot of effort into them. I think people generally have not relied on them much for elections. I could be wrong. It seemed unusual this year that debate was so determinative. They actually got rid of a candidate. Am I right that debates have been less important than they used to be in general?
I don't think they're important at all unless you flub it.
Mm.
Like, no one's going to remember your debate performance unless you really screw it up.
Or what if you have your one statement like, where's the beef with Mondale against Hart in the 84 presidential primary, or Ronald Reagan, there you
like,
go.
Yeah. Or like, you're no John Kennedy.
Lloyd Benson against.
There's no...
Well.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great, like, one-liners, but you're on the stage so often, and the ability for social media, the true socials, the Exosphere, or whatever we want to call that now, to take a different quote and just replay that 100 million times, like, you lose control over your words pretty quickly right now. The rise of AI is going to be something that we see utilized in political campaigns against people's opponents. Like, you're going to lose control of your words and your commentary really quickly. So debates, so long as you don't flub them, there's really not much that's going to happen out of them.
State Rep Roland Lemar, you've had 6 2-year terms, correct?
Hold on. I've had 7. I'm finishing my 7th term now.
Oh, you're going for an 8th.
I'm going for an 8th, yeah.
Oop, I got that wrong. Sorry about that. So you're going for your 8th term. Why are you running for re-election? You've been there 14 years.
I think this is a core moment in New Haven's future. Like, we're talking more broadly about the presidential election and what we think is going to happen nationally. But right now, what's going to happen at the state level over the next 2 years is core to our city's future.
How so?
There are a few reasons. One, we have the end of like ARPA funding. We've had the end of
ARPA was the federal pandemic relief.
Yeah, which opened up a lot of doorways, and being on chair of transportation and the chair of transportation bonding on the finance committee as well, as able to direct a lot of funds to mass transit issues, getting a lot of the roadways and major thoroughfares in New Haven redone, making sure we qualify for as many dollars as we possibly can to reinvest in pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, redoing state streets, about to start in Foxton.
That was federal pandemic money. That's not bonding.
It's a lot of bonding on the transportation side that I did, but it's also federal dollars coming in that frees up more money to do stuff like that.
Okay.
Like, where we used to have bonding dollars at the state level that would have to go towards just our core like projects, a lot of those funds at the federal level came in.
And higher ed too, with the federal ARPA money.
That's right.
Appearing. So what's going to be at stake there? One of the big issues is whether we change our formula, the fiscal guardrails, the volatility cap, meaning that there was a bipartisan deal struck, I believe, in 2017.
That's right.
That we're going to fix our finances by only, if a lot of money comes in one quarter from financial industry people in Fairfield County, we can only spend a certain amount, and then the rest has to go on the rainy day fund and paying down our pension debt. And that's really worked. Our credit rating's gone up.
Yep.
We've maxed out. So some of you guys are saying that was an arbitrary formula. We can keep the basic concept, but spend more money to start using some of those needs. And then other people say that'll blow all the work the state has done for fiscal responsibility, and that we want to keep a high credit rating because over the long term, if you pay down pension, then you have a high credit rating, you're spending less on debt, and you'll long term be able to run the state better.
And I'll tell you this: there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty about what is actually possible and how, like, what we can do and still be compliant with the underlying fiscal guardrails that our state established. That has led to, freeing up $100 to $250 million, I think, per year in additional spending because we've paid down our pension debts. We have to contribute less on an annualized basis.
And the rainy day fund. It was interesting. Last governor race was the Republicans said, let's tap the rainy day fund because of gas prices, because it's a rainy day when it wasn't.
That's right. I mean, and there's a lot of intellectual inconsistency on that because every time Republicans find an issue they want to spend money on, they don't care about these things as much as they purport to when we want to make sure that Wilbur Cross doesn't have a moldy library or that HVAC systems are improved system-wide. Suddenly they really care how we're spending the money. But if it's, bailouts for like suburban folks, and they're all fine with getting rid of that.
So what's going to be at stake now? What do you think needs to be done?
We are going to run into a series of constraints this fiscal year where if we don't look at that in a more serious way, part of that deal in 2017 was there were two Senate Democrats who went to Senate President Looney and said, we're only voting for a budget this year if it's a bipartisan budget. And so suddenly all of the power at that time goes over to the Republican Party.
And that's when Tim McClary was still there. You can actually negotiate.
Yeah, but on the Senate Republican side, Senator Looney is like trying to negotiate. It's a tied Senate at that moment. It's 18-18. Two's got two.
Oh, he had Fasano. He was negotiating.
Yes. Yeah. And so like they've got to craft a deal that Republicans will sign on to so that they can even get two Democrats on board. And so you change you create the fiscal guardrails, you change what qualifies for the spending cap. It used to be previously that if you had extra dollars, you could put that into distressed municipalities and help to buttress like additional challenges that those communities faced. That gets removed. All the funding for distressed municipalities now comes back under the cap, which means like we don't have the capacity to look at our budget, to look at challenges we're facing in Hartford, New Haven, New Britain, Meriden, Waterbury, communities like that, and say, okay, investments there can exist outside of the cap. We can utilize additional funds or surpluses that we have to support needs that we're seeing there. Now we can't do any of that. So re-looking at that, trying to get some additional spending that would go to distressed municipalities outside of those controls is important. Looking at the volatility cap, which is like the amount of money we generate from capital gains, from hedge funds, from folks like that we now say is entirely too volatile of a revenue source to count on or to predict on a year-by-year basis. And so we segregate it out and essentially put that towards pensions. Well, it turns out we actually can predict a certain amount of that. A certain amount of that is predictable. And so we should be able to calculate that as part of our spending capacity.
So you're saying there is more money we can play with, at least for now, because you think that even if the stock market goes down or we have a recession, you believe there's a certain baseline amount of revenue we can count on.
That's exactly right.
But is there a danger of Democrats bringing us back to making us too hostage to the swings in the market?
No, because I think if you structure this intelligently, which is not eliminating all of those dollars outside of protection in the fiscal guardrails, if you just look at the volatility cap and structure what the actual predictable, reliable revenue source is and include that in our spending calculations, then you free up enough money, I think, to like fully fund ECS, to get additional dollars into communities that need it, to look at some structural issues that we're leaving behind, which is like why are our the Hartfords and New Havens, the Bridgeports, the only communities that are actually really growing housing in this community, still struggling with property tax rates that are in some cases 2 times higher than the surrounding suburbs, and it's because of the structural disadvantages that those urban communities have. So
part of that is tax code, part of it is if you're going to free up more money. So what's realistic? Because everyone says we need a lot more money for community colleges, we need a lot more money for early education. I think it's fair to say, Roland, that it's not like we're going to immediately we're going to reopen the formula for the volatility cap and say we have money for all that. Yeah,
that's right. That is the challenge, is because the minute you do that, there are 100 people who think that their issue is the most important issue.
So where's your stand? What are you going to push for if you get reelected?
Mine is one, fully funding ECS, which in New Haven,
educational cost sharing.
That's right.
The amount that gets returned to the cities and towns for education.
That's right. And we're almost there anyway in a place like New Haven. That only would generate an additional like $3.5 million, which is about, I think, 1.5%, maybe 2% of the overall school's operating budget. So that's not a huge change, but it also means looking at like having enough money to look at what the real deficiencies are in educational funding and to help like buttress alliance districts, like looking at a school like Wilbur Cross, where my son just entered this year, where they have an enrollment that's, I think, 1,860 kids, which is like 250 kids over where they probably should be.
It's because people don't want to send their kids to Hill House.
I mean, but if you look at school population across the board in the city, like there is right now a moment in time where we're educating hundreds of students more than we expected, and that we're getting compensated for.
But enrollment's gone down.
Our school, in certain grades, yes. In certain grades, yes. Where the students are showing up now, the needs of those students, there are capacity issues.
Right, because you have a lot of immigrant families
That's right
in the Wilbur Cross district.
And the way our school funding formula works, we actually are 2 years behind looking what our snapshot is, so we're not getting compensated for a number of the issues. And so I think looking at that and ensuring that we can get dollars into our school system to address those emerging
needs.
needs.
would be one, would be the other priority.
ECS, Alliance have to be, I think, the two top priorities.
What's Alliance districts?
Those are specialized. ECS essentially goes to every school district in the state. Like there's a little bit of money that comes from the state to go to almost every community to cover some of the costs. New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport, they get the outsized share of that because of the needs that we have. Alliance is a more specifically tailored programs that you apply for, but only certain districts like New Haven, Hartford.
Is it based on if you're a struggling school?
Yeah,
so that's why
right.
Lincoln Bassett was an Alliance school.
Well, they were a commissioners network school.
Okay, is it the same concept?
Yeah, same concept. Just
so education is one. What else you see and get the money?
Transportation and housing. To me, those are the areas where we have to focus the most. There is, of course, and like this is the thing: when you pick priorities, people get upset that you don't pick their priorities. There's challenges in our nonprofit communities. There's challenges, of course, in our community college systems. But I think that the three
early ed.
And early ed, I mean, particularly now because we moved the kindergarten start age. You have to be 5 before you enter kindergarten now, which is like academically is probably the right choice. But where there are some families who had a child who's turning 5 in the calendar year who anticipated being able to send their kid to kindergarten and now have to find another.
So what would you
year.
be spending on transportation and housing?
So housing, we need a lot more units, and the cost of acquiring land in Connecticut is really expensive. We are about 100,000 units short just to satisfy what our current needs are, and that's not projecting out where our state should be.
So you build?
Yeah, we have. I'm a build person.
You want to be able to go home at night if you work?
Yeah, my wife and I do have a lot of disagreements in the housing space, but I think we agree centrally on this one that like unit production is so far down that it's unnaturally caused incredible.
So would
spike
you be for easing zoning rules?
I'm for getting rid of parking minimums. I'm for getting rid of height and restrictions that seem somewhat arbitrary.
Setbacks.
Setback restrictions that
so
seem
one
somewhat arbitrary.
issue though that's tough for people is affordable housing. So as the bill people say the way you get affordable housing is to have more housing built, including expensive housing, because then that relieves the supply and demand pressure on existing housing. The rents don't go up as much. Other people say that's a theory, but in practice, you end up building more for expensive housing. More of those people come in, and other people actually feel they can charge more. And on the other hand, when I talked to Clay Fowler, the Spinnaker guy who builds a lot of housing here, he actually said that New Haven has an inclusionary zoning law that requires a certain amount of affordable units when you build. He actually said he would not have built some of his new housing if that law had been in effect, because he just wouldn't be able to afford to make a return on investment. That's a lot. Where do you fall?
So I fall more on the side of building units is the most important policy goal that we should have as a state, and it does because we're in an interesting place in New Haven because most of our surrounding suburbs refuse to do anything, refuse to take the issue seriously. You talked about when I have to go home at night. My wife is actively suing one of our suburban neighbors because of their unwillingness to engage in any level of affordable multifamily housing. The real answer on this is it's not a theory to say that building units lowers housing costs. This is now an issue that's been studied over and over again in communities across the country. The most important thing that you can do is build units. That is what we did in the 50s, 60s, 70s to keep housing costs low. It's how we built middle class. Like that is the answer. Now, that is not the full answer. You then also need strong rental protections for people. I love what I'm seeing with a lot of the unionization that we're seeing, the Fair Rent Commission
tenant
expansions.
Unions, the great story.
The tenant unions. It's an incredible story, the New Haven Independent's done an incredible job following a few isolated cases where it appears that There's retaliation for the formation of these unions. Like it's just an incredible story. And the hard part about it is you're watching in almost all of those cases, people risk like their like where they live, going home at night, having a rent, like losing that. And like so there need to be strong rental protections. There need to be some level of enhanced LCI enforcement to ensure that code violations are properly addressed, that people aren't living in horrible conditions. And there do need to be some affordability restrictions. And I think that's where some of the money has to go.
Means. What's affordability restrictions?
So there have to be units that are made more available, whether it's reforming how we have our wait lists with Section 8 vouchers, that how they're utilized. They have to do greater enforcement of advertising and making sure that realtors and people who have units up for rent are opening the doors to folks who have Section 8 vouchers. They're not legally allowed to discriminate against folks.
The interesting about that, sometimes discrimination, other times irresponsible landlords will take the Section 8 money, which is, they get a lot of money out of that.
Yeah.
But they don't reinvest it in their units.
Right.
They kind of pocket it.
Right.
So
there's a lot in the housing space that I think demands additional funding, including like just helping clean up contaminated lands. Like, it's really expensive to remediate to a residential standard for some brownfield locations, but there are just some locations where the cost of land is so prohibitive, and they're good sites. Like in New Haven,
they are doing Science Park, which has contamination. So the tough question for suburban legislator who cares about housing is whether they're willing to say no to their constituents when they go NIMBY.
Yeah.
For an urban legislator, if you believe in build, and increasing supply, maybe are you able to tell your own constituents, I'm not for inclusionary zoning laws that require set amounts of affordable units, and then make it impossible for the builder to build?
I think I think you have to ensure that if you do craft an inclusionary zoning law, that it's responsive to the market. I don't know that all inclusionary zoning laws are.
But that's not the fundamental question. The fundamental question is, do you want to put anything in place that stops someone from building if you truly believe that them building 100% luxury housing will in fact create more affordable housing through the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have different.
I'm pushing here whether you say something that, because everything you said would not make any of your constituents upset.
I can make some of my constituents upset because a number of my constituents are NIMBYs.
Yeah.
Right? Like I could go back. I live in Worcester Square, and Worcester Square has some of the most well-known NIMBYs in the city.
That's
right?
A good point. Yeah.
They stand in the way of redevelopment of Grand Avenue. They stand in the way of.
Good point. Okay, right? So you've said no to them.
I've said no to them plenty of times.
And then how about Historical District Commission when they decide?
I'm not a fan of some of the choices.
They decide people have to build something the way it exactly looked within one block at one snapshot in time.
Yeah. No, I'm not a fan. Not a fan.
Either.
And look, it's got to be easier for folks to make the investments necessary to make sure that we have units available for changing dynamics, or people who they want to live in smaller units than I did when I first moved to the city in 2002 and rented a 2-bedroom place in East Rock for $600 a month. Like that was.
I feel like you've been here a lot longer than 2002.
I've been here in 2000. I think. 2000. I moved here. Yeah.
Right. Roland Lemar is a state representative from the 96th General Assembly District. He's running for an 8th term. He's talking to us here on Dateline New Haven. What are you proudest of the last session? What'd you get done?
So there's a number of things. Like I think the amount of money that we were able to put into like getting schools almost fully funded through the ECS, but additional dollars in through Alliance districts, rebuilding those Wilbur-Cross fields, getting additional dollars for Hill House to rebuild the athletic center, doing a series of investments on our major roadways in the city, which
Foxon Boulevard,
Foxon, State Street, that you can see getting done right now. We started.
That's such an interesting project, because like the same officials, people in those same official positions, when I started covering the city in the 80s, called for making that to a suburban style raceway.
That's right.
And with the Channel 8 building, was that the mayor was so proud of that. It was good. They kept Channel 8 in town by building them suburban, car-centered downtown plant, and now we're trying to undo that because we think development really happens if it's pedestrian friendly and narrow, and reclaiming land to build mixed use.
And you already see more people walking on State Street. Again, I have to cross State Street quite frequently. There's more people walking out there now. There aren't as many people biking yet because the it's
Bike
not
thing's
fully
weird.
done.
You go 3 blocks and it's like, where am I?
Yeah, it's that part's a
It's
work in
fun
progress.
because it's there. Oh, you built this for us, but you.
And eventually it's going to connect to the Farmington Greenway. Like there's a lot in progress there. Same way with out at El Grasso Boulevard. Like we've started to narrow the roadways and make it a little bit easier. There's more work that's going to get done to improve the
Another
pedestrian
thing you
experience.
passed was you're starting a study, right? And in 10 years, we'll have bus rapid transit on Grand Avenue, Will Avenue, meaning lanes that are just for buses. You know, in Oakland, they ended up hating that. They said people got run over because it was so confusing having just this bus lane, just this car lane, and everyone was getting confused going into different places.
I'm not going to look at Oakland. I'm more going to look at what we were able to do with BRT in Connecticut, which is the New Britain to Hartford busway.
But that's
track.
like a highway as opposed to
it's
a
more
mixed-use commercial,
dedicated lanes.
residential. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be harder, but I think we have the experience of running a BRT system here that we can utilize and move in that direction. And New Haven is the right place to do this on-road application.
So you didn't mention the thing I thought you were going to mention first. You fought for years with New Haven's traffic calming community to get traffic cameras
to
catch people speeding. And we actually did it. You got a law passed so that you could. It was a 12-year quest.
Yeah.
And you got it passed, and now we got these cameras up. How's that working?
Well, they just submitted the plan through the Board of Aldermen a few months ago. So they're working on the details now. They're looking at how to install the system, how to run it, and they're going to submit it all to DOT for approval. My hope is we're the first in the state to do it, but communities across the state, West
But how'd that feel working on something 12 years and getting over the finish line?
Honestly, it feels both rewarding because like you put that much time and effort into something, like it or not, like it's a controversial issue, and it's like people identify me personally with it. And so like there are people who aren't happy with it, who will permanently dislike me because of it.
What don't they like?
They just don't like the idea of the technology being utilized at all. They think it's more of a Big Brother issue. There are people who
you put stuff into that, though. You did amend it based on.
I amended it in so many ways
rights.
to like how you can utilize the data, what the images can be used for, that it all has to be deleted after a time-specific period. Like we put a lot of protections in, but there's some people it just still rubs them the wrong way. It feels good, but also at the same time, I'm looking at 12 years where we continue to watch the amount of traffic violence in the city escalate. Across the state, it escalated. We have some of the highest levels of pedestrian fatalities that the state has ever
Do you think
seen.
this can make a big difference?
I think it will.
It will stop because people have to stop driving crazy.
People have
when
to
I go to
stop
other cities, it really amazes me when people like stop when I'm in the crosswalk and stuff. It's bizarre.
It has to change here. The culture of driving in the city has to change, and the state has to change. It's not a New Haven issue. It's not even really just a Connecticut issue.
You know, on the buses, we noticed the kiosk on the green where you buy your passes. You can't. Since May, they were supposed to rebuild that kiosk, and they still haven't. It's September. What's going on with that?
I don't think they were supposed to rebuild it in May.
They said weeks.
Did they say weeks?
Mm-hmm.
I was told that they were going to have a contract in place because part of another thing I'm really proud of actually is we set aside I believe it was $15 million to do bus stop renovations.
Wow, that's a lot.
Across the state, right? I mean, it's not enough to do everything in the state, but it's enough to get us started. We completed a bus stop improvement feasibility plan that the Department of Transportation just released about 2 months ago, working with Commissioner Eucalito. Like they evaluated bus stops in very specific areas and saw what it took to actually get them up to code or get them up to a higher standard or to repair.
But we're
what we
talking
have.
about the kiosk.
The
Like,
kiosk,
there's no place to buy a pass.
I will look into that because my impression was that was supposed to be done by this fall. I will see what the timeline is.
Okay, you can be wrong about that.
Yeah, but yeah, no, like that. Improving bus transit in the city generally is a huge priority. Like we got about $150,000, I believe, to do passes for New Haven public school students.
Yeah, I saw
to
that.
utilize. We put that in the budget.
You know, I loved the pandemic when riding the buses was free. So Boston's experimented with some of that, not their whole bus service. The drivers liked it in general. There were some downsides, but in general, they didn't have to slow the buses and deal with people who couldn't pay. More people rode the bus. Why didn't we go to...
So we were the only state in the country to move towards free fares on a statewide basis. Other municipalities experimented with it for municipally run systems. The state of Rhode Island paid for one bus line to be fare free in Providence.
So we did all ours for like 2 years.
We did the entire state for about 2 years.
I loved it.
I don't disagree with you.
I like free stuff.
In that we have a spending cap, in that we have fiscal constraints and we're stuck making really bad choices, we were able to look at what riders were actually saying to us. And they didn't think the $1.75 was the problem with the buses. They thought the routing is terrible, the bus stops are terrible, the timelines are terrible, the buses themselves.
I have such, you always think the most narrowly about an issue about fix your day, and this isn't a big deal for me. But since Malloy was governor, I would say to him, they were doing 10-year studies of how to fix the bus routes in New Haven. The officials would come, and I always say there's something really stupid about the 246, which is that at rush hour, it doesn't run for 45 minutes, parts of rush hour. So if you just miss it, you can walk a couple of miles, right. But if it's raining. But during the day and hours when hardly one's on it, it runs 3 times an hour. And that was geared to when people used to work from 7 to 3 and 7 to 4 when it was a mostly manufacturing city. Why couldn't something like that? Why does it take all these millions of dollars in a decade and they still have that kind of thing?
I thought most of that had been completed. There's a implementation committee that CT Transit helps
never
done.
Fixed that. I remember it being brought up at the meetings. They had a meeting at Bar with the officials. And this is just an example. So example, it's not a big thing. But why would you have a bus line where a lot of people get out of work at 5 to 6 p.m. and they have to wait 45 minutes to go 2 miles when if they took it when this hardly went on the bus, it was 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. It's another easy thing for me to look at. Yeah.
No, you don't need to. I just
no.
curious.
I mean, but see, that's the thing. Like being chair of transportation means I get to kind of look at get into the weeds a little bit and help solve stuff.
And I actually think the buses run well in a lot of ways. They're clean. The drivers mostly are nice, and
when we're moving to more fully electric buses, you start to see.
Now
them
you did that
utilized.
too. Now you were behind electrifying some of the buses. I remember once one of the batteries blew up, right? And there were some issues about that. How's that going? How much of the bus fleet is both the school buses and the CT Trans buses? How much have you gotten electrified, and what are you going next with that?
So we have mandates put in place at the state level that all of the state transit fleet, CT Transit notably, the small transit districts, have to be fully electric by 2035. And the school buses, there's a tighter timeline for environmental justice communities. It's 2030 they have to be fully electric, by 2035 in the non-EJ communities. It's going kind of slowly right now. We're hearing from a number of potential communities. There are a number of communities who want to do it. We're running into some of the problems of implementation, and people have requested, hey, can we move these timelines back? Myself and my co-chair, Christine Cohen from Guilford, we chair the transportation committee. She chairs the Senate side. I chair the House side. Have uniformly said, no, we're not moving those deadlines. Come to us with what the problems are, and let's solve the problems.
What are the problems?
Problems are having the electrification capacity at a school bus yard. We have in New Haven, Middletown Avenue. It's relatively easy and accessible, but having to charge that many buses in the morning presents a bit of a problem, right? Like the staging of those buses, how long it can take, and like the movements of those buses, how long does it take to get all those buses ready to go so that they're fully charged each morning. So it's working out specifics like that. That one's actually an easier one to manage. A rural community that uses a gravel pit of a area and stores their 8 to 10 to 12 buses in that location, there's no electricity on site to start with. It would cost, it's a major investment to get a charging situation started up there.
Right, the city bought a lot of electric cars and then ended up not using them.
Right. So you can't do this dumbly. You can't just go out and buy it. Like, why didn't you just go out and buy a whole bunch of electric things and get going? Like, well, there's some hard things. So the Hamden facility that handles CT Transit buses is now fully ready to take on more buses. We've gotten a number of them in. It's going to be slow going. We did take a pause for a year to investigate what the cause of that bus fire was. Electric, again, like those images capture the day, and they're used to rail against electrification of transportation fleets. Electric buses are still safer. There's still far fewer fires than there are in traditional combustion engine buses. It is by far the better choice to move to a more fully electric. And that's without even talking about the public health benefits. New Haven asthma rates are 3 times the national average, 2 times the state average, some of the worst in the country. Hartford and Bridgeport are even worse. Like we need to do this for a variety of net positive reasons. One of them is getting off of fossil fuels.
We're talking to State Rep Roland Lemar, running for an 8th 2-year term, despite what you've read in the Independent when I wrote 7, representing the 96th General Assembly District. So big issue right now in Hartford, Roland, as you know, you reminded me when you came in, is this leap in requested electric bills, UI, United Illuminating. The Republicans want to have a public hearing. They want to have a special session right now. They want to take action to delay this increase in what our bills are going in. What's the issue? How much are they going up, and where do you stand?
This get back to that intellectual inconsistency, because the Republicans were dead set against changing the spending rules or utilizing dollars out of the volatility cap or using any of our rainy day funds. Suddenly, for this issue, they're willing to open it up. They don't want to do it for our schools. They don't want to do it for education.
What do they
funding.
want to open up?
They want to just pay off the public benefit charge, essentially.
What is the public benefit?
Public benefit charge is during COVID, we did not shut off electricity for anyone. Like, there was a no shut off clause that we currently have during the winter months for people of different economic means who can't pay their bills. We essentially say you cannot shut off electricity.
We basically had socialism in America during the pandemic, supported by Republicans and Democrats, and it worked.
I mean, I don't know.
People didn't go hungry. They didn't lose their homes, and they started businesses.
I would disagree that was
free bus rides.
I don't think it was socialism so much. More like reasonable protections in a capitalistic market.
Okay. I should get back to that.
Yeah, we can have great economic political theory here. But reasonable protections in a capitalistic market would say you don't shut off people's electricity during the winter months. Well, we extended that during COVID because there were people who could not pay their bills.
So now the bill's coming due.
Now the bill's coming due.
UI said that cost us a lot of money, so how much they want to change?
It's billions of dollars, right? Like, I don't remember the exact number, but it's a lot of money that they feel like they are owed back because
So how much would our bills go up?
So right now you're seeing people's bills going up about 20. UI is less than what Eversource is charging. Small electric company
the case,
had issues. Yeah, UI is actually not as bad. So they're putting a public benefits charge. That paying for that, it's paying for the electrification of homes and other public benefit programs that actually I've supported, frankly, which is a build out of our electric infrastructure.
And why did it take so long to build that in? Why couldn't they have built that into the bill?
Because we were like, it's been a negotiation with the utility companies and PURA. Like, the state legislature doesn't...
is the regulatory body, public utility regulatory agency.
The state legislature does not really regulate the electric companies
Lemar
because we
appointed a head of PURA who's going to be tougher on the utilities, but she just lost the vote 2-1.
She's lost it twice. She's lost it twice.
So why do they still... is it industry capture, basically? I don't even know why do we have private utilities that get all the benefits of government support and a monopoly, but then they get to be rapacious, stock-driven...
This is where you could have a great political theory
why
conversation.
Can't it be Wallingford, where the Republicans have had a publicly owned municipal electric company for decades, and they have lower rates, and they never...
Because we bought a argument. Not we. I wasn't there in the legislature at the time when this decision was made. It was done in the early 2000s, where we deregulated our energy markets in Connecticut, and we essentially said, well, UI, Eversource, the big energy providers in the state. Like, you have a guaranteed rate of return. You can capture this much in profits every year and return it to your shareholders. Nothing more than that. You can't own both generation and distribution. They chose like sort of the distribution markets, and then the generation market is essentially gone. You got the millstones. You got the other large scale energy providers. They negotiate separately, and the private market, the deregulated private market that is in charge of distributing all this electricity to us, has to go before a non-governmental entity for rate requests and rate renewals. Now, those people, the 3 people who make up PURA, the Public Utility Regulatory Authority, are appointed by the governor. There's only 3 of them. They largely are consensus appointees. We have a new PURA chair, Marissa Gillett, who is extraordinary. I think the world of her. She's taken a much harder stance with our utilities. The legislature has been really hard on our utilities. There's a bit of a, you wouldn't say a Cold War. It's pretty aggressive back and forth between the legislature and the utilities at this point, where we are arguing like their way of doing business. They're rewarding a lot of their corporate executives with extraordinary bonuses. The heads of our utilities are some of the highest paid in the country, and that, because that is the traditional pay scale for them, it doesn't count in their profit margins, and so they're able to do a number.
So what would you do?
I would regulate. I would have PURA. Next year we'll go in I think maybe even in a special session, maybe during general session, go in and look at really tightening the financial controls that these utilities have, how they can compensate their employees, how much money they can put into advertising, how much money they can put into lobbying, how much money they can put into stock buyback, like really regulate that to ensure that there's less profit in the system.
What about the public benefits issue? Would you let them recoup it in one circuit? Would you spread it out longer?
I would have spread it out longer, and that is the fight that our Pura chair tried to have. It was essentially to say, you trying to get all of your money back for these years in such a short timeline is going to lead to a price explosion that we don't think our customers.
And people losing their electricity.
Yeah, people getting their shutoff notices now for the first time ever. They don't understand what's happening, and it's frankly it's fundamentally unfair. And the utilities have positioned this as a, I know, it's not your fault. You're a good, hardworking person. They're playing the same playbook that you used to see about public benefits for everything, for welfare, for no matter what it was. It's always just easy to blame the person who's receiving the benefit and saying, it's unfair that you have to pay for this. Well, frankly, it's unfair that utilities demanded a payback timeline that they knew was going to cause these problems. And it hit this summer when utilization rates were at an all-time high in this state because July was so hot. Not everyone, but a lot of people put their air conditioners on at 8 in the morning and kept them running until 10 o'clock at night because it was so hot, and they got extraordinary bills.
I think the answer is also solar. We have solar panels in our house. We send that electricity to UI. They charge us back for sending us, they buy it from us wholesale and send it back to us retail.
Right.
That's sick.
Yeah. No, that's right. And so
but I think we need the technology so that local communities can use the power they actually generate solar and not have these greedy government-protected monopoly electric companies ripping us off from it.
And I think right now, people are feeling it, and it's a real bedrock economic issue for a lot of folks. I cannot handle a 30% increase in my electricity bill. I can't do it. You need to fix this now. And so I think that's why.
So Republicans are right. We should do a special session and make that happen.
Well, they're not wrong in to say that when there are extraordinary economic circumstances, we should be able to look at what our reserves are for. But I would also say that if we're going to look at this, we need to look at 5 other things as well. Because I do think there are timely things that we need to think about, but there are also long-term approaches to what is going to be a challenging market in the next few years. We're bringing a lot of wind and solar on board in the next few years.
To give UI credit, Iberdrola, who's their parent company, have been an international leader in wind.
Yeah, and we just Revolution Wind is just starting off the Rhode Island coast. That's all going to come into the.
They want to do Bridgeport, right? Or is that still?
Bridgeport's it's moving forward, and there's a lot of applications for this, and it's all a grid. You think if the energy source is located in Connecticut, that's Connecticut's energy. Actually, it's a little harder than that. It's more of a New England grid system, and adding capacity anywhere in that grid actually helps bring things down. We've got a silly sweetheart deal that we struck with Millstone a number of years ago that causes prices to go up a little bit more than they probably should. There's a series of reforms right now that I think the legislature has appetite to attack, which I think will be net beneficial moving forward.
State Rep. Lemar has an appetite for an 8th term. He's running against Andrea Zola. Andrea Delita Zola is running as the Republican, the Independent Party candidate. I know she didn't get the Working Families cross endorsement. Did you not ask for it?
I didn't ask for it this year.
The only senator or representative from New Haven out of all our legislators, the only one they endorsed is Gary Winfield. Why was that?
I think he asked for it.
So you just have to ask.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't one ask for it?
In New Haven, it hasn't been as indicative of a message of this is who I am as a candidate. We kind of all know each other as candidates. People know I'm on the left side of the Democratic Party naturally.
One of the things you're on the left side of the Democratic Party is that you'd like to increase the marginal tax rates on the wealthy.
Yes, I would.
That you want to go up, to 8.5% just after $1 million.
That's
right.
A
couple $500,000. That's got nowhere because your governor, Democrat governor, won't keep it on the table. He's still the governor. What is that? What does that look for? Have you pivoted like Martin Looney? Say, let's see if we can get a mansion tax and redistribute wealth that way.
I still prefer the progressive income tax that going up to at least 8. I'm looking at the amount of revenue that Massachusetts was able to generate by having instituted a similar structure where New York and New Jersey's rates are for high income earners. I still think that's the most appropriate way to tackle this, and it's the easiest way to tackle this. I'm not concerned about what, like I've heard from, like, leakage or people moving out of the state because they feel like they're being taxed appropriately. I don't think that that's a real concern, and I think it's a responsible way to attack.
The problem is that it can't be on the table because the governor said it can't.
The governor's been saying it's not on the table. I don't know that I love some of the solutions that have been proffered. I think less than a mansion tax, maybe a second home tax, that could have positive effects.
But you think the real solution is you might have to wait till the next governor?
Yeah, because I think an income tax is the most appropriate way to handle this issue.
So your opponent, when she was endorsed by the Independent Party, asked why. Said she supports ranked choice voting. Do you support ranked choice?
I do support ranked choice voting.
Now, what's the status of that? We have a study committee, correct?
We have a study committee.
Then it would need to be a constitutional amendment.
It would have to be a constitutional amendment, and there are some concerns that have been indicated by a number of folks about how it plays out on the ground for hyper-local elections. But I think there's only been positive results.
So other reforms are further along. We did start election day, early election day voting. How's that going?
Well, we saw it in the primary, and you'll see it in the general election this year.
Hampden had a lot more than New Haven for the same races.
Hampden did a great job.
Except that the registrar was out of town and they ran out of ballots, and they changed the outcome of an election twice.
Yeah, like so.
That was kind of interesting.
So I got stuck right there where my actual quote was Hampden did a great job. Let me finish that. Hampden did a great job. The candidates themselves did a great job activating Hampden's constituency to know where their polling location is, to get people out there. There's a lot of advantages to how they structured it at their library, where people could easily park there. Right. It was really convenient and easy for people to vote that manner. It was a little bit harder here in New Haven. I'm hoping that we figure out a way to message it and communicate it. We're looking at it from on my side of the campaign things, like how do we get people. It's a little bit easier because I represent downtown. East Rock, Worcester Square. It is actually easy for my folks to get downtown to vote early. I have an advantage in that way. But for the rest of my colleagues in New Haven, if they have to tell people they have to drive downtown to vote, that's not that much more convenient.
So in the large umbrella of election reform, the Bridgeport, with the same individuals getting caught every few years cheating with absentee ballots, what should be done about that? How do we deal with election integrity? I know that's the phrase from the right for measures that actually stop voting, but there's a real problem there. What do we learn from what happened in Bridgeport with these repeated absentee ballot fraud that the state knew about and allowed to keep happening?
We have to be stronger. My party has to be stronger on this. I've heard my party co-chair Vin Morrow say this on a couple different occasions, and he's exactly right. He's really strong on this. It's like there should be no tolerance in the city or in our party for people who would interfere with elections in any way.
It's kind of interesting that we are not doing as many absentee ballots as we used to in New Haven.
Yeah, it's a different way of outreach right now. We do more door knocking, we do more robocalling, we do more text messaging, we rely on friends and family contacts. I think our town chair has really made it clear, both in individual meetings and the big group meetings, is like we do this right in our city. Like one of the things that differentiates our city from other places, we know we're doing this right. It has got no concerns.
When we used to have a lot of absentee ballots, every time I reported on after election, asked people who they voted for, it was always fraudulent. Always. Like old people come, they didn't know what they were doing, they didn't need to vote absentee, and people filled it out for them and delivered it.
I remember some articles that you used to write about. And it was always embarrassing, and we struggled as a party. The Democratic Party has struggled in how to communicate this, because we know what the right is trying to do with this with this rhetoric. And
you're helping them.
And we're helping them to a certain extent.
The poster board.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we've got to be smart in how we approach this. I think I really admire how our town chair has spoken on this issue.
Do you have a political role model?
I don't know that I do. Like I came to politics out of policy and wasn't really interested in politicians so much. Like I learned a lot from John DeStefano, working for him for a number of years. I loved the way that he engaged. Like being close to some politicians. Like I saw how in a natural setting, John would just like gravitate towards like the kids who just played in the band outside and be like, "Hey, when did you learn how to play the trumpet?" Like that was extraordinary. And just talking to
And
people.
he always tried to accomplish some big things. He really was ambitious, whether it's public housing reform, universal college for the kids, LCI, in theory.
and things that he knew would be controversial.
Yeah.
Like wait a minute, I'm going to tackle that head on.
Stop a bank sale unless you can.
That's
create a
right.
community bank.
Like I loved it. I was working for him
I
at that
kind of
time.
missed that when New Haven was ambitious.
Well, you just set an incredible target that, like, when you first heard it, made absolutely no sense. Okay, John, we're going to rebuild every school in the city. Sure. Okay. All right. We're going to stand up to this.
I just wish we could have kept up with the HVAC systems.
That's right. So like in that I had a didn't have like a real political mentor. Watching John educated how I try to embrace politics.
Okay, we're on floor 3. We're going to floor 6. What's the elevator pitch why I should re-elect Roland Lemar to be state representative?
Hey, New Haven's future is bright. We're going to make the investments in our city, both in our schools, and our transportation, and our housing networks, to ensure it fits for everybody.
That's not bad. We didn't even get to the 6th floor yet. Elevator's a little slow. Roland Lemar, thanks so much. I love when you come on air. I learn a lot. You really keep a lot of information in your head what goes on at the Capitol.
Yeah, I try to. It's fun. It's a benefit of 14 years going for 16.
So, and we had your opponent on already, so now people have got to hear from both of you.
And look, I want to, like, one last thing. I don't know Andrea very well, but I think the two of us are only going to say positive things about each other. It's going to be a really positive campaign. It'll be on different ideas, different thoughts, different vision for the future of our state, but it's going to be a positive idea-based campaign.
Speaking of positive idea-based, thanks to Harry Droz, the best station manager in the business, for producing today's show. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free.
Thanks, Harry.
From the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day, all night, and all weekend long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.